Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink with a throwback to some cards I did last year, close to around this time actually. I will have links to the other two videos I did last year, and I was calling them Golden Hour, and it was this color combo that I was inspired by, and I have the info in the other videos, and it used gathered twigs and hickory smoke distress oxide sprays. And I was looking up other things and I came across the videos I had done. And I was like, oh yes, I remember. I really loved this combo. And this time I wanted to mix it up with some Lost Shadow Distress Oxide Spray. So I have my 3 oxide sprays. I've shaken them up really well. These need to be shaken up really, really well before you use them because all of the pigments settle in the bottom of the bottles. And then I'm working in my splat box and I have some Canson XL watercolor paper. And I'm just experimenting. It's one of the things I love about the sprays is they're very unpredictable. Because you could do this with ink blending, you know. You could also do this with the regular distress sprays. It'll just be a different look. But yeah, and like ink blending, obviously you have way more control, like exactly where you're going to place the colors. But I was just spraying with water, spraying with the sprays, moving it around a bit, and then you just leave it to dry. And it looks completely different when it's dry versus when it's wet. Like when it's wet, it kind of looks like a hot mess, but let it dry. And these just, I don't know what it is about this like gray and brown combo. It just creates the most pretty look. And adding the Lost Shadow to it this time, it's different than the ones I had done last year. So I was just playing around, you know, spray, add some water, move it around a bit, add some more spray, yada, yada, yada. You could also, after it's dry, you could, you know, add water droplets to get that, you know, splatter look, etc. But I was planning on adding a bunch of other things. So I let them completely dry. And I ended up with this just interesting, like, gray-brown combo. Adding that Lost Shadow, it changed it. It was interesting. So after these were completely dry, I pulled out my Simon Says Stamp FANFARE stencil. The stencil is 6x9, and I've used it in 1 or 2 other videos. I can't even remember. It's been a while. But it was perfect that I could fit both panels behind the stencil. And there was still a little bit of PIXIE spray on the back of the stencil from the last time I used it. I've mentioned this in other videos. I never scrub off PIXIE spray when I use it. I just stick it back in the packaging. It still has a little bit of tackiness, and like I'm showing here, it just works. Although this stencil doesn't need it in this case, like I'm just applying some paste. This is Glacier paste in Quicksilver. And I have press and seal on the container. Highly recommend. I'll have a link to the press and seal because Simon does ship it internationally because it's hard for other people to find. But like I say, when I always use specifically Glacier paste, press and seal has saved. Like this container is years old, literally years old. Still works great because it's sealed up with the press and seal. The reason I love Glacier paste is because it gives you kind of that faux foiled look without needing to mess around with anything for foiling. So live. So I applied that over the stencil, removed the stencil, took the stencil and my palette knife, washed it really good, set those aside. Now, disclaimer. I'm using Vellum and I'm going to use black embossing powder. You all know, if you've watched my videos, I hate black embossing powder. I have ranted about it many times over the years. Still holds true. This is the one exception. I don't think I have any other exceptions. This is the one exception that I will use black embossing powder, and I actually prefer it, is on Vellum. You can still stamp images in black, emboss them with clear on Vellum. It doesn't look the same, and that's the only difference. When it comes to cardstock, I have no problems, and watercolor paper. I have no problem stamping images in black, whether it's images or sentiments or whatever. Stamping them in VersaFine, Clear Nocturne ink, and clear embossing. Works great. Saves having to deal with black embossing powder, because black embossing powder is the devil. It's so messy. But on Vellum, there's something weird when you stamp it in black and emboss in clear. It's just not as crisp. It's okay. It's fine. But I notice a difference. And because Vellum is so super smooth, it's not as much of a nightmare to deal with the black embossing powder as it is any other time. You don't need to stamp. If you're using black embossing powder, it doesn't need to be stamped in in clear or black ink. I'm only stamping these butterflies with the black ink just to make sure I get all the detail, but you can stamp in clear and then use the black embossing powder. It works. But I'm working on vellum, and I'm using Simon Says Stamps beautiful butterfly stamp set. I will have a link at the end of this to my playlist. I've used this multiple times. It's one of my favorite stamp sets. I need to use it more because I love it. I love the sentiments in the set, the mix of fonts, and I love these butterflies. So I use my anti-static powder tool on the panels of vellum. I stamped the images with the VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink just so I could make sure I got all that detail. I coated them with black embossing powder. I was very careful. And I funneled the embossed powder back into the container and made sure the lid was on because black embossed powder just... But I keep it on hand for things specifically like this. I think this is about the only time. Anything else, you can always just stamp in black, emboss in clear, and save yourself the headache. But this just gives just perfect crispness, and these butterflies are the detail on them. That's why I love this stamp set. And embossing on vellum, embossing powder melts very, very, very fast on vellum. Any embossing powder, it doesn't matter. It's because vellum is so thin. So you barely need to blast it with your heat tool. It's melted. It's good to go. Once these were melted, I'm going to use the coordinating wafer dies to die cut these. So I'm just going to tape those wafer dies into place with little bits of washi tape just to keep them from shifting when I run them through my die cut machine. And that one, the first one I had done for like the stamp shifted before when I inked it, I don't even know. So off camera, I just separate them, like cut those apart with scissors and then die cut them because the dies wouldn't fit so close together. But die cut all my butterflies. And then I have my card bases, which are top folding A2 white note cards. And I put post-it tape at the score line. And then I'm using a new to me tool. I'm not going to do a review right now. I will have more videos coming. I'll probably have a dedicated review of these. These are the new Picket Fence Studios paper pouncers. I have the set. And when I did this video, this was my very first time using them. I was just curious. So I pulled out the gray one because there's a neutral set and a rainbow set. And these are not blending tools. They're literally pouncers, just like the name says. So you just go up and down. And I was curious because I was like, why not test it out with this stencil? Because this is a super detailed stencil. Because I originally thought, I was like, these aren't going to work for this because it's not going to go through the stencil. Oh yeah, it does. Love it. For detail stencils, I think I found my new favorite tool. And for adding ink to die cuts, I don't know, I got to play with it more. Will have more videos coming. So stay tuned for all of that. But to use it over this stencil was great because you don't need PIXIE spray. I didn't need to tape down because I'm not doing a swirling motion with brushes. Nothing's getting caught. And it goes right through. So I was using Lost Shadow Distress ink. Just pick up the ink with the pouncer, pounce it on top of this stencil. It's obviously very subtle in this video because this is the inside of the card. I didn't want, dark, intense, but so far so good. I'm impressed. So again, stay tuned. I'll do more with these little tools. So after I was done with it, they recommend just wiping them on a damp cloth to kind of clean them. So I was just testing it with a piece of paper towel, added a little bit of water, but I was like, there's not really any ink. Like it looks like there's a bunch of ink on it, but there's not. Like, it's not transferring anything. So I was like, good. It goes back in this little container. Good to go. So after I had done that, I took a scrap of dark gray cardstock and used my anti-static powder tool on it. And then I'm stamping one of the sentiments from the set onto that with clear embossing ink. And then I'm going to use Simon's white embossing powder to emboss these sentiments. So pour that over them, tap off the excess, and then melt that with my heat tool. And then off camera, I will die cut these sentiments with just a little circle wafer die. And of course, like after they're heat embossed, wipe off the excess anti-static powder because it makes everything look kind of cloudy and messy. So did all of that. So these will be the sentiments for the front of these cards. So after those were done, I've got other die cuts, which I'll get to in a second. I wanted to add a sentiment to the inside of the cards as well. So I took the little circle sentiment from that beautiful butterfly set, the one that says long distance hug, and lined that up onto the inside of my card in my MISTI. And I'm inking this up with Simon's Cappuccino ink. So ink that up, and I'm going to ink it up and stamp it twice just to deepen it a little bit. Their inks do smooth out as they dry, so at first they'll look a little bit blotchy, but then they smooth out. And the neat thing is, and I don't think it really shows up in photos, but you can see it in real life, is you can still see the stencil pattern underneath the solid portion of the sentiment, which, I don't know, I really like that. It's kind of neat seeing that. So stamp that sentiment onto the inside of both of the cards. And then I added one of the butterflies that I had heat embossed and die cut from Vellum. Just added it in the teeniest amount of adhesive as needed. Vellum does not need much, and adhesive does show through Vellum, so I just put it right behind the body of the butterfly so the glue will not show through. So I adhered that to the inside. And then the panels that I had sprayed and added the stencil, like the Glacier paste to, I had die cut those after everything was dry with a rectangle wafer die so that it was smaller than my A2 card. So adhered those into place with craft tacky glue. And then I die cut white cardstock with Simon's WHIRL Leaves wafer die. I use these in, as of doing this voiceover, my last video. So kind of obsessed with this one at the moment. Love it. I love the detail of it. So I die cut that from white cardstock, adhered that to the card fronts with craft tacky glue, and then just stuck them under my MISTI to hold everything flat to let the glue dry for a couple minutes. And then same as with the butterflies on the inside of the cards, I just added a little bit of craft tacky glue behind the bodies of these butterflies, and that's all you need. And plus then the wings kind of pop up a bit naturally, especially using a liquid glue, because it makes Vellum kind of curl a tiny bit depending on how much glue you use, etc. So it gives it dimension, but it's not adding any like bulk or anything because they'll go flat to go in the envelope. So then the little circle sentiments, I just used thin foam squares. And then I pulled out several different colors of bling because I wasn't 100% sure what I was going to use. But I settled on the Studio Caudia Cafe au Lait pearls, which are favorites. I need to get more of these. I'm starting to run out. Says the person who has multiple lifetimes. I know. I am aware of the irony. I don't care. I love having every single color, multiple packs of them. It just makes me happy, man. So anyway, sprinkled those throughout the card, and then adhered them into place with dabs of craft tacky glue. And then once those are adhered, I'm going to pair these cards with some metallic silver envelopes, and that's going to finish them off. So like I said earlier, I will have links to the other 2 videos I did using this color combo, and I will also link to the playlist I have with all the videos I've done using this beautiful butterflies stamp set, because look at it. Look how beautiful they are. I need to use these more. I love this set so much. It's so beautiful. So all of that will be at the end, as well as, of course, links below the video in the description box. I'll link to my blog post. I'll have a supply list. I'll link to all the supplies I used. You guys can check that out below if you are interested. Thank you all so very much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping and commenting, letting those robot overlords know that you guys love what you're seeing so I can keep doing my job. Always appreciated. Subscribe if you haven't. Love to have you. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.